Vallabha Givardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Givardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Givardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Givardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Natira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivashkachaya Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Kantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, entitled Questions by Vidura, text number 16. Swayam Danu Dvari Nidhayamayam.
Swayam Danu Dvari Nidhayamayam.
Need my glasses. Ratu Puroma Masuta Didopi. Saitam Atu Yobana Kanabane. Gatavyato Yadaru Manayana. Swayam Danudvari Nidhayamayam. Vatu Puroma Masuta Ditopi. Saitam Atyubana Kanabane. Gatavyato Yaduru Manayana. Swayam Danudvari Nidhayamayam. Vatu Puroma Masuta Ditopi. Saitam Atyubana Kanabane. Gatavyato Yaduru Manayana. Word for word. Swayam. He himself. Danu Dvari. Bow on the door. Nidhaya. Keeping. Mayam. The external nature. Vatu, brothers. Pura, from the palace. Mamasu, in the core of the heart. Taditaha, being afflicted. Api, in spite of. Saha, he, Vidura. Itam, like this. Ati Ubana, severely. Kana, ear. Banai, by the arrows. Gata Vyata, without being sorry. Ayak, excited. Guru, great. Manayana, so thinking. Translation. Thus being pierced by the arrows through his ears and afflicted to the core of his heart, Vidura placed his bow on the door and quit his brother's palace. He was not sorry, for he considered the acts of the external energy to be supreme. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. A pure devotee of a Lord is never perturbed by an awkward position created by the external energy of a Lord. In Bhagavad Gita 3.27 it is stated, Prakriti kriya manami guna kamani savashaha ahankara vimudhatma tataham ittimanyate. A conditioned soul is absorbed in material existence under the influence of different modes of external energy. Absorbed in the false ego, who thinks he is doing everything by himself. The external energy of a Lord, the material nature, is fully under the control of the Supreme Lord, and the conditioned soul is fully under the grip of the external energy. Therefore, the conditioned soul is fully under the control of the Lord. But due to illusion only, he thinks himself independent in his activities. Duryodhana was acting under such influence of the external nature, for which he would be vanquished at the ultimate end. He could not accept the sound advice of Vidura, but on the contrary, he insulted that great soul, who was a well-wisher of his whole family. Vidura could understand this because he was a pure devotee of the Lord. In spite of being strongly insulted by Duryodhana's words, Vidura could see that Duryodhana, under the influence of Maya, the external energy, was making progress on the path toward his ruination. He therefore considered the acts of the external energy to be supreme. Yet he also saw how the internal energy of the Lord helped him in that particular situation. A devotee is always in a renounced temperament, Vidura was never attracted by the royal palace of his brother. He was always ready to leave the place and devote himself completely to the transcendental, loving service of the Lord. Now we got the opportunity by the grace of Duryodhana, and instead of being sorry at the strong words of insult, he thanked him from within because it gave him the chance to live alone in a holy place and fully engage in the devotional service of the Lord. The word gata vyata, without being sorry, is significant here because Vidura was relieved from the tribulations which trouble every man entangled in material activities. He therefore thought that there was no need to defend his brother with his bow because his brother was meant for ruination. Thus he left the palace before Duryodhana could act. Maya, the supreme energy of the Lord, acted here both internally and externally. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Nagam Tunanda Jagananjana Shalakaya Shakshurminatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchaka Putarupascha Kripasundave Evacha Patikanam Pavadyo Vaishnivo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivazari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Just pray for all the blessings of the devotees. I can speak with something about you. Hare Krishna. Actually, Krishna Rupa Mataji just mentioned how cold it is in the mornings this morning to me, and how cold our houses are, and I just thought how wonderful it is that Radha and Adari, you know, they know how to enjoy it. They have a fireplace in the house. So we just take shelter of Krishna, and we also get the benefit of the same facility. And if we hang around for breakfast, we get the best food on the planet as well. And we get to associate with the devotees, which is even higher. So thank you. So in this lead up to this verse, King Parikshit is asking Shikadeva Goswami the intricacies of why Vidura left the palace of Dhritarashtra, his brother. And by leaving the palace, Vidura was able to eventually meet up with another great devotee called Uddhava and get his association. And this is the art of Krishna consciousness. The devotee, when he becomes a bit more experienced, he can turn a seemingly unfavourable situation into something very beneficial for a spiritual life. And as we can see in the previous verses leading up to this one, we get a strong impression that associating with other people can be very difficult. And particularly for a spiritualist who's on the spiritual path, associating with a materialist. Because the materialist and the spiritualist, they have different perspectives on what the goal of life is. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that says, Yanisha Savabhutanam Tasham Jagati Samnivi Yasham Jagani Bhutani Sanisha Pashato Mune. What is nigh for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and vice versa. So this verse primarily means is that they both have different perspectives on how to live their life. And spiritualists, who as devotees, we want to awaken our attraction to Krishna. And the materialists, they just want to get more involved in the material world. So there's a bit of a difference. And the difficulty with associating with materialists, according to Srila Prabhupada, he says in the Bhagavatam, Yashasti Bhakti Bhagavati Kinchine Savagunas Tatra Samasatastara. And he primarily says that the materialists, they don't have any good qualities. And this is a big statement, because we were materialistic to some extent before, and we thought we had good qualities. And similarly, Duryodhana, he's a very accomplished materialist, and he's thinking he has such great qualities. But according to the Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada, he doesn't have good qualities. And the reason is because when there is a threat to someone's sense gratification, they can turn very quickly to protect their sense gratification. And we can see with Vidura and Duryodhana, Duryodhana was trying to take the kingdom of the Pandavas and Yudhisthira. And Vidura was pointing out to Duryodhana that actually this is incorrect. What you're doing is incorrect. And Duryodhana felt completely threatened because his sense gratification was he wanted to rule the planet. So immediately he chastised his sincere devotee relative, Vidura, and kicked him out of the palace just to protect his sense gratification. And there's also another example in the Bhagavatam where this happened. And Kamsa, his sister Devaki, she got married to Vasudeva. And it was a custom that the brother would take the sister with the husband to their new palace and drop her off. So on the way on the chariot, Kamsa heard a voice from the sky saying, your sister, Devaki, the 8th child is going to kill you. So immediately he grabbed his sister and was going to chop off her head. Because his sense gratification was threatened. And I can remember when I was young as well, I had a bit of a experience when someone turned on me. As young kids we play a lot, so I was playing table tennis. We used to have competitions with our young friends, we're only 12 or 13. And we'd play outside and have table tennis competitions, and my friend had a big dog, and it was a collie. It was like a lassie dog. I don't know if you've seen the show Lassie in Australia. And we were sitting there playing table tennis, and I was patting the dog, and then I stopped patting it, and then next thing you know the dog had my head in its jaws. And it was like trying to pull me, and I realised maybe I shouldn't have stopped patting the dog. I stopped his sense gratification. So all my friends who were standing next to me, they jumped on the table tennis table to get out the way, and the table tennis collapsed, and they all bolted, to take shelter, and this dog's, trying to swallow my head. And then when it opened up to take the next bite, I ran away. And I thought afterwards, even animals, protect themselves from their sense gratification, for their, when their sense gratification gets taken away. So we can see that, Vidura spoke out against Duryodhana, so Duryodhana retaliated. And they both had different relationships with Krishna. And Duryodhana, he was trying to enjoy the opulence of Krishna. And Vidura he's a servant, so he was using everything in Krishna's service. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Bhogashvaya prasaktanam taya aparta shaitasam. It says there is bhoga, enjoyment, and ashvaya, which means opulence. So we can see that, we need opulence in the world and we need to enjoy. Duryodhana was using that opulence to enjoy himself. And therefore he couldn't understand or appreciate Krishna's position, even though Krishna was there before him. And Vidura, he also has opulence and he has enjoyment, but he was using the opulence of Krishna for Krishna's enjoyment. And therefore when Krishna was there before him, he could appreciate Krishna's exalted position. And we also, it's cold now at the moment, but most people have a reverse cycle air conditioning unit. So in summer it blows cool air, and in winter it blows hot air. So the same electricity goes into the unit, the reverse cycle air conditioning unit. And nowadays you have a remote, so you can kind of press heat and press cold. And you can choose which way you want to use that electrical energy going through that unit. So similarly, we have a choice. We're all here in Krishna's energy, so to speak, and we can choose how we want to use his energy. We can choose it like Vidura, use it in Krishna's service, or we can use it like Duryodhana and use it for his own sense gratification. And the symptom of a devotee is that they use everything in Krishna's service. And not only that, but the symptom of a devotee is that we always take shelter of Krishna. We don't use his energy for ourselves. So Arjuna, he asked Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Stira pagna shikha vasha samadhista shikeshava stita kim pavasheta kimasita vrajeta kim. So Arjuna is asking Krishna this, he's asking, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is situated in transcendence? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he walk and how does he sit? Arjuna is asking Krishna this because he wants to know how he can identify a spiritual person. Because many people call themselves spiritual, but if we don't understand what their symptoms are, it's very hard to distinguish. what to see, what to look out for, how to identify a spiritual person. So Srila Prabhupada says that as a diseased person has his symptoms for which he is known as disease, and as a rich person has his symptoms for which he is known as rich. So similarly, a devotee has his symptoms, or a spiritualist has his symptoms for which he is known as spiritual, or a devotee. And the first one that Arjuna asks is, how does he speak? And Srila Prabhupada explains that speech is the most important function of any person. By hearing one speak, you can understand who they are and where they're at. So we speak about, as devotees, we speak about Krishna, because Krishna is purifying. There's one word that is used to help us understand the purifying nature of Krishna, and that is Krishna is antiseptic, just like the sun. The sun shines on dirty places and it purifies it. So similarly, if we speak about Krishna and chant his holy name, and we get purified, it has that effect, it's antiseptic. So what does it purify? It purifies our heart and mind. These are very dirty places. And not only that, but discussing material things, it has the opposite effect. It makes our heart and mind very contaminated. And there's a word in the Bhagavatam, or two words, and it says tushti and pushti. Tushti means nourishment and pushti means satisfaction. So the verse in the Bhagavatam, which helps us understand this, Bhakti parashuno bhavo virakta anyatra chesha trika eka kala prapaja manasha yatasantastush tushti pushti shud apayo tu gasam. So here this word tushti and pushti is used, and in the Bhagavatam it says that when we eat something we become very hungry throughout the day, and when we eat something, every morsel of food we eat, we feel nourished and satisfied. That's a fact. After eating a meal when we're hungry. So similarly, when we engage in devotional service, three things happen simultaneously. That is, we develop devotion to Krishna by rendering service. It naturally comes out of the heart. And not only that, but we also get to perceive Krishna in our lives more and more, the more we engage in devotional service. It's different for everyone, but everyone has an experience of how Krishna is in their life after engaging in devotional service. And another one is that we become less influenced by those material things that are causing us trouble before. So similarly, if we speak about Krishna, we actually start to feel nourishment and satisfaction. And it becomes more manifest, more visible when we engage in devotional service, this nourishment and satisfaction. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example of a bird in a bird cage. I mean, it's a pretty simple example, but it has a lot of meaning, is that if we have the bird and we just look after the bird cage, there's no nourishment and satisfaction for the bird within. And the bird will ultimately not feel so happy. So similarly, if we hear about Krishna consciousness, and we feel that sense that we're getting nourished, and it nourishes the soul. And when we speak about things that aren't related to Krishna, we put ourselves into a bit of illusion. Because one of the illusions is we think we're the body, but the other illusion is that we think we can become happy without Krishna. And it's not possible, sorry to say. But also as well, Arjuna asked Krishna, what is his language? And I looked up the meaning of language. And language means it's a system of communication that are used by a community or a country to convey messages. So if we hear someone speak Italian, we know they're from Italy. I go out on books quite a lot and I learn a few languages, some basic ones, and I know if you meet an Italian you go ciao. And I think Germans is guten Tag. And the Spanish, South Americans is hola. They relate to that quite nicely. So if we hear the devotees speak, the language they use and speak from is what they learn in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. And by hearing this from a devotee, we understand they're from Krishna's community. They're from Krishna's community. And maybe not recently, but previously I was doing books in Surfers Paradise on this topic of language, and I tried to stop a couple of people who were walking past, were in a bit of a hurry. And I said, excuse me, you guys locals are out of town, just to stop them. And they went around the corner and the guy came back. And he come back really, I could see he wasn't very happy. So he said, you're dissing me? You're dissing me, bro? You're dissing my missus? You're dissing my missus? And he goes, I'll bring you down, bro. I'll bring you down, bro. And then he goes, I'll go bring a carload. I'll bring a carload back, bro, and I'll bring you down. And I thought, I need some kind of interpreter. I couldn't understand what he was saying. And I got the gist of it. He wasn't happy with me and was going to bring me down and bring his friends back and sort me out. So I said, I'm a monk. Yeah, I'm a monk. It's okay. And he goes, you're not a monk, you're a punk. So I could understand by listening to his language, he was a gangster. And more than likely he was associated with like gangster-like people and maybe watching gangster movies and really taking on that role. So similarly, if we hear devotees speak Krishna's language, we understand they're from Krishna's community. And if we hear other people speak, we can understand from their language, where they're from as well. So language is very important. And another question Arjuna asked Krishna is, how does he walk? Now, everyone walks in the material world. I mean, there's no difference between a devotee and a non-devotee. And even animals, we have legs, we kind of move around. But they're not going to the same destination. And my spiritual master, Devanrita Swami, he has like yoga centres throughout New Zealand. They're like little bases that people can touch, and come in contact with Krishna consciousness and yoga. And he says quite often all the young travellers that travel all around the world, they go to New Zealand, to these yoga villages, and they express the same thing. They say, hey, we realised that we were travelling around the world doing sense gratification there. We spent so much money coming to New Zealand and we're roaming around the streets just doing the same thing. And that's why they go to the yoga centres, because they realise they want something more than just wandering around the world just enjoying sense gratification. So the devotee, they move around the world a bit differently. I mean, we go shopping, we go cooking, we clean, we do many different things with our legs, moving around, but the purpose is that we identify ourselves as a servant of Krishna. We're not moving about the world, seeing this world as a place for our enjoyment and getting entangled and becoming dissatisfied. We're seeing it as a place where we can serve Krishna. So the devotee's purpose for walking around is very different. And the next question is that Krishna asks Arjuna, how does he sit? And in most yoga societies, if you sit in the lotus position, which I find very uncomfortable for short periods of time, people consider that a spiritual position. But does that mean that if we can't sit in the lotus position, we're not spiritual? Oh, absolutely not. So Krishna explains that when Arjuna asks Krishna how does he sit, it means how is he situated? How is one situated in relation to Krishna's energies? And we understand in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna has three primary energies, and we're one of them. We're called Tatastha or marginal. So we're sitting in the middle of these other two energies, and the other energy is spiritual energy, and the other energy is Krishna's material energy. So we can choose which way we want to go. Do we want to take up the spiritual energy, the spiritual path, or go the material path? Krishna always gives a little energy, this independence. And there's this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Purusha ho pakiti stohi punkte pakiti jangunan. And this just explains, Krishna does, that the living entity, he's just following this material energy, is getting pushed around or bullied. I don't know if anyone's been bullied before or pushed around, but it's not very nice. Someone pushes you. Hey man, why'd you push me for? It's real obtrusive. And I can remember in Surfer's Paradise, it all happens in Surfer's Paradise. It's a very exciting place. You never know who's going to walk around the corner and challenge you. But I can remember I saw this guy walking down the street, and he was thinking anyway, as he was walking down the street, the whole universe was shaking. He was a real big guy, really, like a bodybuilder. So I thought, I'll try my luck. Excuse me, mate. And he goes straight away, don't call me mate. Don't even try and stop me. I think he knew what I was about and what I was trying to do. So for my self-preservation, I didn't go any further. I just watched him go past. But I had noticed that he would walk around the streets, and he seemed very well to do, and looked after himself, but he would drive around Surfers Paradise in his supercars. He used to have like these $500,000 supercars, like Lamborghinis and Audi racing cars. So these cars would go like 300, 400 kilometres an hour, but he could only go 25, just the speed of the traffic. But what he would do though, he would grab his car, run, and everyone would look, go, oh wow, look at that guy, He's a supercar driver. But I noticed that he had his name on his number plate. His name was Iman. So I thought, all right, I'm going to see who this guy is who hates me so much. He'd always look at me down the street. He always kind of, with his glance, warn me, don't even approach me with this stuff you've got. So I looked on the internet, and I saw his profile, his Facebook profile, and he was a well-to-do website developer, like making adverts for like businesses and that. It's very good. And it's funny enough, on his website he said he promoted himself as being a benefactor of everyone in the world, particularly young kids. So he said, if all you young kids are getting bullied at school, come see me. I'll take you for a drive in my supercar. I'll protect you. And I thought it's very kind of unusual how people think, because here he is trying to give shelter to people that are getting bullied, these kids, but he himself is also getting bullied as well. He's getting bullied by the material energy. He thinks he is the body, he thinks he is the car, he even names the car after him, Iman, and he thinks everything is in relation to him, so he's getting bullied and he's trying to give shelter to the young kids that are getting bullied. So it's just not possible. And in the purport here, Srila Prabhupada explains, in spite of being very strongly insulted by Duryodhana's words, Vidura could see that Duryodhana, under the influence of Maya, the external energy, was making progress on the path to his own ruination. So we can see that Duryodhana is getting bullied by the material energy. And Vidura, seeing this, he could understand there's no shelter for me here in the palace anymore. Why should I stay here? He could have stayed, it's transcendental, but he thought there's no purpose in me being here anymore. So this is a symptom of a very advanced devotee, is that they don't stay in places where there's no opportunity to preach anymore. Right? They go to another place to preach. So in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, we practice the rules and regulations of devotional service. And these practices, they're teaching us how to walk in the world, how to move about in the world as a devotee, how to speak about Krishna, how to understand the language presented in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and also how to situate ourselves, how we can sit in the material world, how we can situate ourselves in relation to the devotees and also the process of devotional service. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this takes a bit of practice actually, that's why we have to follow sadhana bhakti. But in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we can see that there are other devotees who have perfected themselves in this practice of devotional service, but they don't really need to follow the rules and regulations to have an attraction towards Krishna and to take shelter of Krishna. It's very natural for them to do that. It's very spontaneous. And there's this very advanced devotee in the Chaitanya Charitamrita called Mukunda Das. And Mukunda Das, he was a royal physician for the king of Orissa, Maharaj Pataparuja. And at one point he was giving medical advice, because he's a doctor, to the king, and he was sitting on a very high platform with the king discussing medical things. And the servant of the king came, and he had a peacock chamara, a fan, and because it was hot at that point in time, and he went above the king, the servant, with the peacock fan, and he hailed it above the king, and Mukunda Das saw the peacock fan, and it immediately reminded him of Krishna. And he had just intense attraction for Krishna, so he went into ecstasy, the royal physician, and then rolled off the dais, the platform, and come crashing to the ground. And the king looked down and he thought he was dead. So he ran down this platform and went and saw Mukunda Das, who was lying unconscious, and he aroused him to consciousness, and he said, Mukunda, where is it paining you? And Mukunda, he said, well, it's not paining me very much there, king. And the king then said to Mukunda, he said, how did you fall off the platform? Or what happened? And Mukunda Dasi says, well, dear king, I had this thing called epilepsy. And the king, being very intelligent and a devotee, he thought, well, actually, that's not the case. You're a very advanced devotee, you know. Just by seeing the peacock fan, the natural attraction toward Krishna had aroused. So we may not be, you know, show these symptoms towards Krishna when we see Krishna in the deity form or, you know, see a peacock fan around. But one thing we can do, we can show the symptom of being enthusiastic in our service. And not only that, but we should also show the symptom of being respectful and also wanting to serve the devotees. And I can remember when I was in Melbourne, we used to have these ecstatic kirtans. Yadu would even attest to that, he was there. And I can remember we were in the kirtan and we're dancing ecstatically and jumping up and down, like Hare Krishnas do. And I come crashing to the ground and I started rolling around. And I kind of had tears in my eyes and I was thrashing about. And all the devotees, they didn't even pay any attention to me. And they were just like dancing, Hare Krishna, and I kind of twisted my ankle. And I kind of pulled myself out of the kirtan and got outside. And one of the devotees afterwards said, oh, we thought you were like in ecstasy, rolling around on the ground screaming, but I was just screaming in pain. So, we're not all going to show these symptoms initially, but Krishna actually sees all these services that we do in the temple, right, as equal. And, you know, whether we're a pot washer or a preacher or a manager, Krishna sees all the services that we do equally and he reciprocates it differently according to how we perform those services. And it's explained in the HG Charanaravinda, just to highlight this point, that when Lord Chaitanya was in Kanda, he instructed 3 of his very dear devotees. And as I was speaking about just before, Mukunda, he's a real physician, he told Mukunda, you just earn material wealth and spiritual wealth by your duty, by your occupation. And then Mukunda Das had a son, Raghunandana, and he told Raghunandana, you just serve the deity in the temple. And then he had another devotee called Narahari, and he told Narahari, you associate with the devotees and preach. So Srila Prabhupada explains that there were 3 devotees and they got 3 different instructions. And one would seem higher than the other, like preaching would seem higher than, you know, just maybe deity worship. This is our conception. But Srila Prabhupada explains that one person was encouraged to earn money by his occupation. One person was encouraged to worship the deity in the temple, Gopinath, that was their deity, and one person was ordered to preach. And Srila Prabhupada explains they seem separate, they seem different on different levels of service, but they're not. Because each of them were given an instruction to serve Krishna. And each of them followed that instruction very faithfully. So the whole purpose of service is to actually just please Krishna. So by executing these instructions very nicely, they all please Lord Chaitanya. And there's a nice pastime with Raghunandana. He got the instruction to serve the deity in the temple. And I was saying his father, Mukunda Das, he was a royal physician. So one day Mukunda Das, being the royal physician, he got engaged in some medical business. So he went away, but before he left, he saw his son, and he said, Raghunandana, my dear son, I'm leaving today, but the deity needs to eat. So you need to prepare a Raja Bhoga, like a lunch offering for the deity. And he told his son very firmly, make sure the deity eats. Raghunandana, make sure he eats. So then that morning, Raghunandana, just being a young boy, he prepared a lunch offering for their deity Gopinath. And he performed it very carefully and dutifully and with a lot of devotion. And he sat before the deity with the offering and he rang the bell and he goes, Gopinath, eat. Gopinath, eat. Now, we don't do this when we offer bhoga to the deity. It's a bit more formal. We offer prayers and we're a bit more respectful, but here's a young boy and he had devotion to Krishna. So he was telling his deity, eat Gopinath. And then he saw that the deity didn't eat the food was still on the plate. So then Raghunandana started crying incessantly with intense eagerness for the deity to eat. And the deity Gopinath took compassion upon the young boy, so he started eating the bhoga just with his hand. So they're eating off the plate. And then when the father came back, Mukunda, and he saw his son there, and he asked his son, "Where's the Mahaprasadam?" I think this is a mantra that all the devotees say. Where's the Mahaprasadam? So his young boy, his son, he said, "Well, there's none left. The deity ate it off the plate." And Mukunda Das, he understood that his son doesn't lie. So he was very astonished. So he told his son to offer something else, a ladu, to the deity. And then the Mukunda Das hid, so he could witness his son when he offered to the deity. So his son offered the ladu, and the deity just ate. And he ate half a ladu. And Mukunda, observing this, understood that the deity had been too full from eating lunch. So he was firmly convinced that the deity had taken this food from his son. And Mukunda Das was, put in ecstasy, understanding the glorious position of his son. So, in the material world, the reason I give this example before is because in the material world, even though Krishna sees all the services as equal, in the material world, everyone considers something higher and something lower. And this is illustrated by Dhuridan. Dhuridan, he reminded Vidura that he was a son of a kept mistress. He was in a lower position, and Dhuridan was in a high position. He was a royal prince, a king. So Dhuridan was attached to the royal position of being a ruler, and Vidura was detached, right, and as being a servant of Krishna, and therefore he left the palace. Now, a devotee is attached to Krishna, is not attached to his position. And I know for myself, if we manage, or if you're a spiritual master, or if you're GBC, we're attached to being a servant all the time, not to our position, because as devotees, our position can change, just like that. Like Vidura's position changed. He was in the royal palace, next he was homeless. So he identified himself as a servant, so he wasn't disturbed. So similarly as devotees, we identify as a servant, not to our position, because Krishna can change our position within a moment. And if we identify that, we become very morose and very disturbed, losing our position. But if we maintain the sense of being a servant, it doesn't matter where we are or what happens. We'll always see ourselves in relation to Krishna. In the material world, just like Dhuridan, everyone thinks they're the boss. And if you say you're the boss, everyone will challenge you. I'm the boss. And the impersonalists, they're the people that see everything as one. They'll consider everyone the boss. And the Mayavadis, they'll say, well, if Krishna is boss, he's like one of us. He's like a human boss. But as devotees, we see Krishna as the boss, and we're his servant. And in the purport, it says here, I'll try and find it. Vidura thanked. It says, Vidura thanked Krishna, from within, because it gave him the chance to live alone in a holy place and engage in devotional service. So we can see from Vidura, he didn't take this adverse situation as something which he resented. He immediately thanked Dhuridan from within in Krishna and saw his opportunity, right, to take up a different service in a different place. That's why he went on pilgrimage. So we can see that Vidura has these transcendental qualities. And that is what makes a devotee attractive. And when we don't have these qualities, we end up like Dhuridan, very envious. And there's a nice story just to finish up, just illustrating this point on how glorious a devotee is when he exhibits these qualities. And that was with Maharaj Chitraketu. And Maharaj Chitraketu, he was cursed by Parvati. She's the wife of Lord Shiva. He was travelling around, Maharaj Chitraketu, in this aeroplane, and he was singing the glories of Krishna with many beautiful women who were also chanting the glories of Krishna. And they came across this assembly of these great sages and ascetics, and they were hearing from Lord Shiva, who had his wife sitting on his lap. And that's not something you do very much. But Lord Shiva is transcendental, and Chitraketu saw this and he kind of laughed a bit and made a few comments, and this really kind of fired up Lord Shiva's wife, Parvati. So she cursed him. And she cursed him to become a demon, to take a demoniac body for this offence. She took it very seriously, but Lord Shiva didn't. So what did Chitraketu do? Chitraketu, he was powerful enough, he could have cursed her or retaliated, but he came down in his plane and landed, and then got off his plane and then sat in front of Parvati and Lord Shiva, and he offered obeisance to them, and he thanked her. He thanked her for this curse and saw it as a benediction. And even though Parvati, Sati, is very, very beautiful, she's the most beautiful person in the creation, the material creation, this is what Lord Shiva was saying, and he said, "My dear wife, although you are the most beautiful lady in this creation, I find that Chitraketu's quality surpasses even your beauty, because he showed these amazing devotion qualities of being humble and being respectful, and he didn't get offended." So the glories of a devotee in any situation is that they don't react to provoking, situations. They always remain a devotee and very humble. So I've almost run out of time. Vidura Ki Jai is very inspiring in this pastime. If anyone has any questions or they'd like to reflect on or add, you can ask now. Yadi's going to hand a microphone around.
Krishna, just in relation, I really like that point where you said that materialists have no good qualities because as soon as their sense gratification is pregnant, then they retaliate like that. So, but one point is like I've often heard, because sometimes when I see materialistic people, I kind of like, maybe in a way envy him because I think, man, this guy, he's got so many nice qualities. He's very organised, he's very pucker in his habits and whatever else I did. And I've often heard Prabhupada say these devotees, or these people, they might have so many good qualities, but they're just like 0, 0, 0s without Krishna. And they're just but you're saying they have no good qualities at all, but it might seem what they do have some good qualities. So how do you justify that statement with what Prabhupada said in regards to that?
Yeah, we can see in this pastime with Duryodhana was extremely successful, and he seemingly had great qualities. He was an expert manager, great politician, and he ruled the citizens quite well actually. This is what he's explained. But we can see when Vidura challenged him, all those qualities just faded away. And as devotees, we know that we're going through the process called Anata Nivritti. So we're in the process of clearing these unwanted desires and unwanted qualities from the heart. So apparently Duryodhana had good qualities, but these qualities of envy and anger and that, they're still in the heart. And it doesn't take much for them to get stirred up. So Prabhupada explains, even though they have good qualities, it doesn't take much for these bad qualities to come out. And unless one follows a spiritual path, particularly devotional service, these bad qualities usually will stay within one's heart, for their whole life. So we're very fortunate we get the opportunity to follow this process and clear these unwanted things, from within our heart. And it's not that we become disrespectful. I was reading this pastime with Lord Chaitanya. He was in Orissa with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had a relative, his name was Amoga. And when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya would serve Lord Chaitanya lunch, this relative Amoga would burst through the door and start criticising Lord Chaitanya. "Hey, look at the way you eat, you're eating this opulent food." And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya would get disgusted at this relative jumping in and blaspheming Lord Chaitanya. He'd chase him out. And later on, he really disturbed Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and his wife, Amoga, by this behaviour. And he developed cholera, this Amoga, just for being offensive. And this is a compassion of Lord Chaitanya that we should have with other people who may not have such good qualities. And is that Lord Chaitanya, he went to Amoga and he showed compassion upon Amoga, and he introduced him to the chanting of Hare Krishna, and he freed him of his disease condition, which he had was cholera. So similarly, that's our role as well as devotees. Even though non-devotees may not behave properly. We don't behave properly. But we should also show compassion towards them, and by showing compassion towards them we can uplift them and help them on, put them on the spiritual path. So I hope that answered your question okay. Anyone else like to make a comment or add something?
Yeah, I have a question regarding the Bhagavad Gita verse that you were mentioning, in which Arjuna asked Krishna what is the body language of how does the self-realized person. So you were mentioning that it's a little bit symbolic. I was always convinced when I read that verse that he was referring to the way the self-realized person walks, sees, talks, and everything. But you were comparison that he wasn't really related to that. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, he is relating. What do you mean by symbolic?
Because you were saying that actually the way you see it doesn't matter, or the way, it's not in relation to self-realization. So you were saying that actually when Arjuna asked Krishna how does he see it, he's talking about how does he see it within the material energy, etc. I understood, I don't know if I'm wrong, that you were saying that actually when Arjuna is asking about all this actually physical, physical feature, like how does he walk, how does he sit, that he was relating to that side, not that he was relating to something else. You know what I mean?
I think so.
What was the question?
When I mentioned the verse in the Bhagavad Gita, how Krishna's asking Arjuna, or Arjuna's asking Krishna, how does one sit, how does one walk, and he was helping Arjuna identify, how do we identify a devotee or a spiritual person, and Mataji is asking, maybe what I was saying was a bit symbolic, like how does he sit means not only how he sits in the asana, but how he's situated in relation to Krishna and his energies. So she was asking, can I maybe explain, elaborate on that?
And also, going after that verse, when I read the Gita, I can see that Krishna's not answering any of that. He's giving an answer about the spiritual position of a self-realized person, so he's not answering the exact question. Like, for example, I ask you, how does a pure devotee sit? And then you start, instead of telling me how does he sit physically, you tell me the qualities, the spiritual qualities that he has. So I was just a little bit to find out.
Yeah, I actually learnt that off Vaisheshika Prabhu, listening to his class speaking on that. So he just maybe elaborated on, how we can identify someone, not just a sitting posture, because that's one form of yoga, but what he's talking about in the Bhagavad Gita or presenting Krishna is bhakti yoga. So I think Vaisheshika Prabhu, when he explained that, was teaching us how to identify a devotee who's practicing bhakti yoga, not so much as a hatha yogi, and how he's situated, on how he sits. I'm sorry I don't understand your question so well, but yeah. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.